Few figures in history have dominated global politics quite like Vladimir Putin. With a billion-dollar fortress dubbed Putin's Palace and the Scheherazade, one of the largest and most luxurious yachts in existence, his name is synonymous with untouchable power, staggering wealth, and deep secrecy. Once a shadowy KGB operative, he ascended to become Russia's most formidable ruler since Stalin, orchestrating a reign built on strategy, control, and relentless controversy. But while he presents himself as Russia's strongman, the real story of his rule is filled with power struggles, hidden wealth, and international tensions that have defined the modern world. Since taking power in 1999, Putin has transformed Russia's economy, expanded its military influence, and positioned himself as a key player on the world stage. But beneath his carefully controlled image lies a political career marked by corruption allegations, censorship, and high-stakes conflicts that have put him at odds with the West. How did a former intelligence officer become one of the most powerful and controversial figures of the 21st century? And what secrets lie behind his billion-dollar empire, his rise to power, and the scandals that could define his legacy? Let's dive into the untold story of Vladimir Putin. Before he became one of the most powerful and controversial figures in modern history, Vladimir Putin was just a boy growing up in post-war Soviet Russia. His early years were shaped by hardship, discipline, and a relentless ambition that would later define his political career. But while many believe his rise to power was calculated from the start, the truth is far more complex. Born on October 7, 1952 in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, Vladimir Putin's early life was anything but privileged. His parents, Vladimir Spiridonovich Putin and Maria Ivanovna Putina, were survivors of World War II, and their struggles left a deep mark on him. The family lived in a small, cramped communal apartment, a common reality in Soviet-era Leningrad, where privacy was a luxury. Putin grew up witnessing the aftermath of war, economic hardship, and the rigid control of the Soviet regime. His father was a factory foreman and a former soldier in the Soviet Navy, while his mother worked as a cleaner, barely making ends meet. These humble beginnings shaped his personality. He learned early on that survival required strength, adaptability, and loyalty. From a young age, Putin was drawn to stories of espionage, military strength, and Soviet patriotism. He was fascinated by the idea of becoming a KGB officer, an ambition that set him apart from his peers. Unlike most Soviet children who idolized cosmonauts or athletes, Putin admired spies and political leaders. At just 16 years old, he boldly walked into the KGB headquarters in Leningrad and asked how he could become an agent. He was told he needed a law degree and military experience, setting him on a path that would define his future. While he excelled in academics, Putin's real passion was combat sports. He took up judo and sambo, becoming an expert in both disciplines. This wasn't just a hobby, it was a mindset. Judo taught him patience, strategy, and the importance of controlling one's opponent, lessons he would later apply in politics. In 1970, Putin enrolled at Leningrad State University, where he studied law with a focus on international affairs. But academics weren't his only priority. He used this time to build connections and align himself with influential professors and political figures. After graduating in 1975, his persistence paid off. He was recruited by the KGB, the Soviet Union's most feared intelligence agency. His role was gathering intelligence, tracking foreign operatives, and protecting Soviet interests at all costs. Unlike spies who were stationed in glamorous locations like London or Paris, Putin was sent to East Germany in 1985, where he operated under deep cover. He worked in Dresden, a city controlled by Soviet forces. His time in the KGB shaped his worldview, political philosophy, and leadership style. He learned that power is maintained through secrecy, control, and loyalty, principles that would later define his presidency. In 1989, the world changed overnight. The Berlin Wall fell, and the Soviet Union's grip on Eastern Europe began to crumble. For Putin, this was a turning point. As protest and political unrest spread, he saw firsthand how quickly power could slip away. The Soviet Union was no longer the unshakable force he had once believed it to be. By 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed entirely, and the KGB was disbanded. With no clear future in intelligence, Putin pivoted to politics, but unlike many former Soviet officials, he adapted quickly. he returned to St. Petersburg, where he used his KGB connections to secure a position in the city government. He became an advisor to Mayor Anatoly Sobchak, a reformist politician who introduced democratic policies in post-Soviet Russia. Putin worked behind the scenes, but his influence grew quickly. He handled foreign relations, business negotiations, and legal affairs, skills that made him indispensable. Many saw him as efficient, disciplined, and loyal, but few realized that he was already positioning himself for greater power. By the mid-1990s, Putin's work in St. Petersburg caught the attention of powerful figures in Moscow, including those within President Boris Yeltsin's administration. His ability to navigate Russia's new capitalist system, his connections to business elites, and his KGB background made him an attractive candidate for a national role. In 1996, Putin moved to Moscow and joined Yeltsin's presidential administration. His rise was swift and strategic. Within just a few years, he was promoted to director of the FSB, the successor to the KGB. By 1999, Putin was appointed Prime Minister of Russia, a position that placed him just one step away from ultimate power. And then, in a shocking political move, Boris Yeltsin resigned on December 31, 1999, paving the way for Putin to take over as acting president. At just 47 years old, Putin had gone from a low-level KGB officer to the leader of the world's largest country. But his rise to power was only the beginning. His presidency would soon reshape Russia and the global order. Vladimir Putin's early years reveal a leader who was strategic, patient, and always thinking 3 steps ahead. From a childhood shaped by poverty and war to a career in intelligence and politics, his path was marked by discipline, ambition, and an unshakable belief in control. But the real story isn't just about how he got to power, it's about what he did once he got there. For years, Vladimir Putin has cultivated the image of a leader dedicated to Russia, portraying himself as a man of discipline, patriotism, and modesty. Officially, his financial disclosures paint the picture of a simple statesman, one whose wealth consists of a modest salary and a small apartment. But outside of official records, talks of a different reality have fueled speculation, revealing a world of staggering luxury, hidden fortunes, and a network of wealth so deeply rooted in secrecy that it remains nearly impossible to trace. Despite his public insistence that he is nothing more than a servant of the Russian people, the real question remains: how does a man who claims to live modestly exist in a world of billion-dollar palaces, extravagant yachts, and assets that stretch far beyond Russia's borders? While Russian oligarchs flaunt their riches openly, Putin's approach is different. His name is rarely linked to major assets, yet his trusted allies, political insiders, loyal billionaires, and longtime confidants, control estates, private jets, and businesses that operate within his sphere of influence. Unlike Western billionaires, whose fortunes are meticulously documented, Putin's wealth is a maze of corporate structures, offshore accounts, and silent agreements that keep his true financial empire hidden from public view. This is why, when allegations surfaced of a sprawling billion-dollar palace on Russia's Black Sea coast, the Kremlin swiftly dismissed them as fabricated. But satellite images and leaked documents told a different story. A private compound, heavily guarded and inaccessible to the public, stood as a monument to extreme wealth and power. Inside, the details were almost unbelievable. Marble hallways lined with gold accents, chandeliers that cost more than most Russian citizens make in a lifetime, and a secret tunnel leading directly to the sea, offering a discreet escape route should one ever be needed. But despite the growing evidence, Putin remained silent. He neither confirmed nor denied ownership, allowing speculation to build. Critics argued that the lavish estate, equipped with private theaters, underground ice rinks, and luxury spa facilities, was funded by a network of business elites loyal to the Russian president. Men who had amassed their wealth through lucrative state contracts and, in turn, ensured Putin's access to limitless resources. Beyond the walls of the palace, Putin moves through the world in a way that few can. When he travels, his convoys consist of meticulously secured vehicles, black bulletproof limousines that glide through Moscow's streets with an air of calculated dominance. His custom-made armored limousine is more than just a car. It is a fortress on wheels, built to withstand any threat, mirroring the level of control he demands in every aspect of his life. The air, too, belongs to him. When he flies, his jet is no ordinary aircraft, it is a flying command center. outfitted with secure communication channels, reinforced defenses, and interiors designed with luxury in mind. Gold-trimmed furnishings, silk-lined walls, and a level of exclusivity that few world leaders can match define his airborne presence. To the world, he presents himself as a pragmatic ruler, but behind closed doors, the privileges of power paint a different picture, one in which luxury is a given, not a choice. His movements are rarely predictable. One moment he is seen emerging from high-profile diplomatic meetings, and the next, he is sailing on waters far from public scrutiny. Reports of a $600 million superyacht, docked in secret locations and watched over by an elite crew, have only intensified curiosity about his true lifestyle. Unlike those who openly showcase their wealth, Putin ensures that his is always just out of reach, visible enough to spark intrigue, but distant enough to remain officially untraceable. If there is one area where Putin's taste for excess occasionally surfaces, it is in the details, the rare glimpses of luxury that appear when he least expects them to be noticed. A carefully placed watch on his wrist, a seemingly discreet accessory, yet one that carries a price tag that rivals the annual earnings of entire families. Collectors and analysts have long noted that his timepieces are no ordinary selections. They are symbols of exclusivity, handcrafted and designed for those who do not ask about price because it is irrelevant. Putin's watch collection is worth millions. Some of the rare timepieces linked to him include a Patek Philippe Grand Complications valued at over $1 million, also a Blancpain Lemon Aqua Lung, which is a luxury diving watch worth over $10,000, and a Breguet Marine, a sleek high-end model costing over $100,000. This extends beyond material possessions. The spaces he occupies are reflections of power. When he attends events, the seating arrangements are carefully orchestrated to reinforce hierarchy. The settings are grand, designed to evoke dominance rather than mere elegance. Every room he enters, every table he sits at, carries the weight of absolute authority. But the greatest luxury Putin enjoys is not an object or an estate, it is access. In a world where wealth often translates to influence, his position grants him something far more valuable than possessions: the ability to shape global affairs, control industries, and dictate the direction of entire economies. While others measure riches in financial terms, Putin's wealth is defined by something far more potent: unchallenged, far-reaching control. Unlike traditional billionaires, Putin does not need to sign ownership documents or appear on corporate filings. His wealth exists through the people around him, a carefully cultivated network of business magnates, energy executives, and political insiders who owe their fortunes to his leadership. Oil, gas, banking, media, every major industry in Russia operates with an unspoken understanding that loyalty is the price of success. Through these silent agreements, Putin's access to wealth is limitless. Private estates remain in the hands of trusted allies but are always available to him. Corporate accounts may not bear his name, yet their resources move in ways that suggest otherwise. Money is a tool, but power is the real currency, and Putin has mastered the art of using both to his advantage. Despite the growing investigations, the reports, the leaked documents, and the countless pieces of evidence linking Putin to vast wealth, the Kremlin maintains one consistent response: denial. Officially, there are no private islands, no offshore accounts, no hidden bank vaults filled with gold. There is only a humble servant of Russia, a man of the people, uninterested in the excesses of the West. But the world sees what is left unsaid: the discreet motorcades, the silent business dealings, the quiet accumulation of assets that no leader on a modest government salary could ever afford. All of it forms a puzzle with missing pieces that, despite efforts to keep them hidden, slowly come together. Putin has built a financial empire without ever claiming ownership. He does not need to. His influence ensures that everything he desires is always within reach, without the burden of accountability. While others chase wealth for its own sake, his fortune exists as a byproduct of something greater, a level of control that no billionaire could ever buy. But the question remains, how long can this empire remain intact? In a world where power is constantly shifting, where global politics evolve and new leaders emerge, can Putin's carefully built network withstand the pressures of an ever-changing landscape? Few leaders have left a mark on global politics quite like Vladimir Putin. From his early days in the Kremlin to becoming one of the most dominant figures on the world stage, his rule has been defined by strategic moves, calculated risks, and a relentless pursuit of control. For his supporters, he is the leader who restored Russia's strength, revived its economy, and reasserted its place as a global power. For his critics, he is a leader who has consolidated power through force, silenced opposition, and expanded his influence at the cost of democracy. But regardless of perspective, one thing remains undeniable. Putin has shaped Russia's modern era like no one before him. When Putin first took office in 1999, Russia was still reeling from the collapse of the Soviet Union. The economy was in shambles, inflation was skyrocketing, and the country had defaulted on its debt just a year earlier. Foreign investors had little confidence in Russia, and oligarchs controlled vast portions of the country's wealth. It was a nation on the verge of economic ruin. Putin's first priority was stabilizing the economy, and he did so with a firm hand. He launched aggressive reforms that restructured the tax system, cut down on government debt, and restored state control over key industries. Oil and gas, Russia's most valuable resources, became central to his economic strategy. Under his leadership, state-controlled energy giants like Gazprom and Rosneft expanded their reach, bringing in billions in revenue. By the mid-2000s, Russia's economy had rebounded dramatically. GDP surged, wages increased, and the standard of living for many Russians improved. The country paid off its debts ahead of schedule, and for the first time since the Soviet collapse, Russia appeared to be on solid financial ground. But beneath this economic revival, Putin's consolidation of power was just beginning. Beyond the economy, Putin set his sights on rebuilding Russia's military strength. The fall of the Soviet Union had left the Russian military underfunded and outdated, and Putin saw this as a vulnerability that needed immediate attention. Over the next 2 decades, defense spending skyrocketed. Russia developed advanced missile systems, modernized its nuclear arsenal, and expanded its military presence in strategic regions. This show of strength wasn't just about national security, it was about sending a message to the world that Russia was no longer a weakened post-Soviet state, but a force to be reckoned with. The most defining moment of Putin's military strategy came in 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine. It was a move that shocked the world, drawing condemnation from Western nations and leading to heavy sanctions. But within Russia, the annexation was widely popular, reinforcing Putin's image as a leader who was willing to defend Russian interests no matter the cost. His military influence wasn't confined to Russia's borders. Under his leadership, Russia became deeply involved in Syria, backing the Assad regime and positioning itself as a key power broker in the Middle East. This expansion of military influence only further cemented Putin's standing as a leader who was shaping global affairs on his terms. One of Putin's greatest accomplishments, at least in the eyes of his supporters, has been his ability to maintain control over Russia's political system for more than 2 decades. Since first taking office, he has reshaped the country's political landscape, ensuring that power remains firmly in his grasp. Over the years, he introduced constitutional reforms that extended presidential term limits, allowing him to potentially stay in power until 2036. The political opposition, once a vibrant part of post-Soviet Russia, has been systematically weakened. Critics have been imprisoned, media outlets have been silenced, and protests have been met with force. To Putin, these moves are about stability and national security. He argues that a strong Russia requires a strong and unified government free from foreign interference. His supporters believe that his leadership has brought order to a nation that once teetered on the edge of chaos. But to his critics, this consolidation of power is nothing short of authoritarianism, a move that has stripped Russia of democratic freedoms and crushed any meaningful political opposition. Beyond military and political power, Putin has leveraged Russia's vast energy resources to expand his influence on a global scale. As one of the world's largest oil and gas producers, Russia holds enormous sway over Europe's energy supply, a position Putin has used to his advantage in geopolitical negotiations. During conflicts with Ukraine, Russia cut off gas supplies to parts of Europe, demonstrating the power it held over the continent's energy security. European leaders scrambled to find alternative energy sources, but Russia's dominance in the sector gave Putin a strategic advantage that extended far beyond traditional diplomacy. Energy agreements with China and other Asian nations further solidified Russia's role as a key player in the global economy. By controlling such a critical resource, Putin ensured that Russia would remain relevant on the world stage, regardless of political tensions. Despite ongoing tensions with the West, Putin has used major global events to showcase Russia's strength and modernity. The 2014 Sochi Winter Olympics were a prime example. Russia spent a staggering $50 billion, the most expensive Olympics in history, to transform Sochi into a world-class venue. While critics pointed to corruption and overspending, the event allowed Putin to present Russia as a powerful, capable host nation. The 2018 FIFA World Cup further reinforced this image. Millions of visitors from around the world flooded into Russian cities, and despite concerns about security and political tensions, the tournament was widely regarded as a success. These events weren't just about sports, they were carefully planned out moments of diplomatic theater, reinforcing Putin's message that Russia was a dominant global player. For over 2 decades, Putin has transformed Russia from a struggling post-Soviet state into a key global power. His supporters argue that he restored national pride, strengthened the economy, and positioned Russia as a force to be reckoned with. His critics see a leader who eroded democracy, suppressed opposition, and prioritized power over progress. Regardless of perspective, Putin's impact on Russia and the world is undeniable. He has reshaped the balance of global politics, influenced economies, and ensured that his presence is felt on every major international issue. But with rising global tensions and increasing pressure from both internal and external forces, the biggest question remains: how long can he hold on to this power? For over 2 decades, Vladimir Putin has been one of the most powerful and controversial leaders in the world. His supporters see him as a strong, strategic ruler who has restored Russia's global influence. His critics, however, paint a vastly different picture, one of a leader who has built his empire through political suppression, corruption, and control. From allegations of rigged elections and silencing opposition to hidden wealth and global conflicts, Putin's career has been shaped by scandals that have drawn worldwide attention. But unlike many leaders who crumble under controversy, Putin has not only survived these allegations, he has thrived, collecting even more power in the process. For years, speculation has surrounded Putin's true wealth, with reports suggesting that he is not just one of the most powerful men in the world, but also one of the richest. While official government records list his assets as modest, investigative journalists and political critics have uncovered a complex web of hidden accounts, offshore holdings, and luxury properties controlled by his closest allies. These individuals, often referred to as Putin's inner circle, hold ownership of oil companies, banking institutions, and massive real estate empires. Yet the benefits always seem to trace back to Putin himself. One of the most infamous symbols of this alleged hidden fortune is the billion-dollar palace on Russia's Black Sea coast. The grand estate, reportedly featuring private theaters, underground tunnels, and gold-plated interiors, has been widely linked to Putin despite official denials from the Kremlin. The 2021 investigation led by opposition leader Alexei Navalny exposed secret documents and leaked footage of the property, fueling public outrage and international scrutiny. But, as with many allegations surrounding Putin's wealth, the Kremlin's response was simple: dismiss and deny. The reports they claimed were nothing more than Western propaganda and political attacks. And just like that, the controversy faded, leaving more questions than answers. One of the most defining aspects of Putin's leadership has been his iron grip on political opposition. Over the years, critics, activists, and journalists who have dared to challenge his rule have faced arrests, exile, or even worse, mysterious and untimely deaths. Among the most high-profile cases is Alexei Navalny, a fierce critic of Putin who built a movement against government corruption. Navalny became a target of the Kremlin's crackdown, facing repeated arrests and legal battles. But the most shocking moment came in August 2020, when Navalny was poisoned with the Soviet-era nerve agent Novichok. He barely survived, thanks to emergency medical intervention in Germany, but his return to Russia was met with immediate imprisonment on politically motivated charges. Navalny's case is just one example of a long list of political figures, activists, and journalists who have suffered under Putin's rule. Critics of the Kremlin have been poisoned, shot in broad daylight, or imprisoned on fabricated charges, sending a clear message to anyone who dares to challenge Putin's authority. But despite the growing list of political prisoners and exiled critics, Putin remains unmoved, continuing to tighten his control over Russia's political landscape. Since taking office, Putin has ensured that his grip on power remains unchallenged. While Russia continues to hold elections, multiple reports suggest that these elections are tightly controlled, heavily manipulated, and designed to guarantee Putin's victory. In 2012, massive protests erupted after allegations of voter fraud surfaced, with opposition groups citing ballot stuffing, intimidation tactics, and unfair media coverage. Despite international criticism, Putin secured another term, dismissing allegations of election rigging as foreign interference. But the most defining moment in his power consolidation came in 2020, when he introduced constitutional changes that allowed him to remain in power until at least 2036. With the stroke of a pen, he ensured that his rule could extend well into the future, further solidifying Russia's transformation into a one-man state. Putin's leadership hasn't only been defined by domestic control. His actions on the global stage have sparked some of the biggest geopolitical conflicts of the 21st century. The annexation of Crimea in 2014 marked a turning point in Russia's relationship with the West. What Putin described as a move to reclaim historical Russian territory was seen by the international community as an illegal invasion that violated Ukraine's sovereignty. The response was swift: sanctions from the US and Europe, diplomatic isolation, and a surge in global tensions. But Crimea was just the beginning. In the years that followed, Putin's military forces became involved in Syria, Libya, and Ukraine, positioning Russia as a key player in multiple international conflicts. Western nations accused him of funding proxy wars, interfering in democratic elections, and using cyber warfare to destabilize rivals. The accusations didn't stop there. Allegations of Russian involvement in US elections, cyber attacks on major institutions, and covert operations in Europe all pointed to a leader willing to wield power in ways that extended far beyond traditional warfare. Despite mounting evidence, Putin has denied all involvement, dismissing every claim as anti-Russian propaganda. But the pattern remained clear. His leadership wasn't just about ruling Russia, it was about influencing the world. In modern Russia, free speech comes at a cost. Under Putin, journalists, activists, and independent media outlets have faced increasing restrictions, censorship, and government oversight. State-controlled television networks dominate the airwaves, ensuring that Putin's image remains carefully curated. Dissenting voices are silenced through legal action, forced shutdowns, or, in extreme cases, outright violence. International watchdogs have repeatedly ranked Russia as one of the most dangerous places in the world for journalists, with multiple reporters facing deadly consequences for uncovering corruption and government abuses. Beyond the press, LGBTQ+ rights, political protests, and free speech have all been systematically targeted under Putin's rule. Laws restricting gay propaganda, crackdowns on demonstrations, and the suppression of cultural expression have drawn widespread condemnation from human rights organizations. But as protests rise and opposition movements attempt to push back, the Russian government's response remains the same: swift, brutal, and uncompromising. For all the power Putin has amassed, his leadership has been defined by a constant stream of scandals, conflicts, and global scrutiny. His ability to silence critics, control narratives, and maintain an unshakable grip on Russia has ensured his survival. But at what cost? His rule has left Russia more isolated than ever, facing heavy sanctions, diplomatic tensions, and growing unrest from younger generations who see him as a relic of the past. While he remains in control for now, history has shown that no leader, no matter how powerful, can rule forever. Did you know that while Vladimir Putin built his power through politics and secrecy, there's a billionaire who gained influence through technology and public innovation? Well, that's Elon Musk, who transformed multiple industries from electric cars to space travel while documenting it all on social media. And you can explore his fascinating empire by clicking on your screen now.